Alright, folks. I'm gonna be sort of replaying Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Now, this is a game that I played through a couple of years ago when it dropped on PlayStation 4, and it was like a. It wasn't a free game of the month. I think it was still $15. It may even still be $15 for all I know. But in the PlayStation Store, they dropped this game, and I remembered playing it when I was a kid, when I was 5 and 6 years old, way back in 1999, 2000, when this game was relatively new. I was playing it on the Nintendo 64 that my brothers had at home. And back then, I really didn't understand the mechanics of the game. And now that I'm much older, I actually do. And so I'm going to replay it this time with better audio quality. That's really my main purpose in re recording, or not re recording, but redoing this Let's Play on my YouTube channel. It's because when I tried to do this the first time, the audio mixing was so terrible. I hadn't adjusted the volume of my microphone and the volume of the game to match, and I was just using the PlayStation recording. I wasn't doing anything funky in post to make that happen. So for a lot of the videos, you can't actually hear anything I'm saying. The orchestral soundtrack, ripped directly from the Star Wars films for this entire game, is too loud to really hear anything I'm saying the whole time. So I'm gonna redo it, the whole thing, and I think I'll try to squeak it into 10 episodes again. But this time, I'm gonna use Gasgano's pod for the majority of the playthrough because when I was a kid, I used Gasgano. Um, so, quick overview of the game before we get into the races themselves. It's a series of pod racing circuits. So you have this amateur pod racing circuit showing here at the top, and then once you've beaten all the races here, you get to the next circuit, so on and so forth. In certain circuits, once you get to the fourth or fifth race, you can't continue to the last couple unless you've already finished and gotten first place finishes in all of them. But we'll be aiming for first place anyway. This game's very easy. It's not difficult, but I'm playing it more for nostalgia than for any real challenge. The one thing I want to run through before we get into the actual game is how the mechanics of the pods work, and it's pretty standard as far as other vehicle or racing games are concerned, but they're all displayed here. And one thing that is different about the pod racing game is that your vehicle damage is not quite cumulative, but pops up at the end of every match. And it's a little funky how it works. So, first and foremost, you got your basic stats like your traction, which is how hard the pod grips the track. This is a little weird because it doesn't have actual tires like a car, so the traction that it would have is kind of kind of a silly stat. But really, it's just the more traction you have, the better your handling is going to be. It's kind of analogous to the handling in the same way that turning is. Turning, pretty self-explanatory on that one. The better the component you have for your pod, the better the turning is, or in reality, the more responsive. There's some tracks where you're almost turning in on yourself. The turns are so steep. Some tracks have like S turns. We probably won't see those for a little while. Most of the early tracks are just like straight, like they're like ovals or like a slightly misshapen square. So you kind of just get to boost through them. Next is your acceleration, just like typical acceleration. It's how quickly your pod goes up to speed. It's not really as important as your top speed, though. Your top speed is really what wins you the races. Air braking, it's just your ability to brake. You actually need it to be stronger the faster your pod goes. And again, just like turning, once you have the ability to turn around these S curves, the air brake is really necessary because you could boost and be going like 900, I think it's kilometers per hour down these tracks, and you'll need to brake hard to make some turns. To that end, boosting is something that your pods can do. It drastically increases your top speed. It's a mechanic that you can do by pressing the left analog stick forward and charging up a meter. It's very easy to do, though. You can only really do it on straightaways because you have next to no control when you're boosting. But your engines can overheat and actually catch fire if you boost too frequently or boost for too long in one setting. So the cooling is how you counteract that. If you have a high top speed and you're boosting frequently, you can upgrade your cooling to make it sort of even out. And as you can see here, the cooling on Gasgano's pod is terrible. Next, last piece, repair. As mentioned, your pod can overheat, and you can also bump into the sides of the track or objects in the track and be damaged. If your pod is too damaged, it breaks, and when it breaks, it's kind of like Mario Kart on the N64. There's a little bit of a pause, and then your cart's just kind of dropped back in. So your pod just kind of sits there in a limbo land for a little bit, but meanwhile everybody is passing you when you're waiting for your pod to kind of get back on the track. So the repair function is there in case you take a few bumps, but it's not too bad. You can hold down, I believe it's R1, and it will repair your pod slowly. It also makes you slow down, so you have to use repair at points when you are already really ahead, because you're trying to keep that lead. But that's really the long and the short of it as far as the mechanics. They're not so much different compared to any other racing game, but what makes this one unique is that unlike other racing games where you might want to just get all of those little blue bars there to maximum, this game doesn't allow you to do that. I mentioned earlier that there's a sort of cumulative damage, and that's not quite right. But between each race, 4 of those 7 stats there will be hindered. You can break up to 4 parts of your pod in a race, and they need to be repaired by pit droids, which you can purchase every race. The problem is that the maximum amount of pit droids you can purchase is 4. So if you have all of the parts to make your pod maxed out, that's 7 different parts, and 4 of them could break, and that would be even, but sometimes 6 or 7 of them will break, and so you just end up with these. They can't be repaired for a couple races because your pit droids will not be there. You don't have enough pit droids to repair all the parts. Essentially, 7 things can break, and you only have 4 people there to fix it. And you don't get to assign, if I recall, which ones they fix. So you could have a race where, say, you're turning and your top speed get ruined because the parts are broken, but the pit droids can't fix them. So then you have to participate in another race where you end up losing out, and it drags the game down. So we're going to try and focus on just maximizing 4 stats. Top speed, cooling, acceleration, and turning are probably going to be the ones that really need it on Gasgano's pod. His traction as a base is actually pretty decent. But without further ado, let's dive in. Right on the Bunta training course. One other thing down here in the winnings column, you can actually shift the winnings from skilled to winner takes all to fair. You want to do winner takes all on every single race. There's no reason not to do winner takes all, because Truggets, in the early game especially, which is the currency of the game, are very hard to come by. So you want to win in first place every time, maximizing your money. And there are other kind of cheatsy ways to do that with the junkyard, but we'll worry about that at another time. For now, let's just jump in.
Welcome to Tatooine, pod race fans. Our glorious host, Jabba the Hutt, has moved into the arena.
Yamo de Jabba the Hutt.
Low poly Jabba the Hutt is my paralysis demon. Alright. So, we're going to dive in here with Gasgano as the pod racer. I just need to remember what button to press because it's been a while. The thing about Gasgano that I didn't realize as a kid, and I now realize, is that his pod is big. As a kid, I liked that the pod was large, but one problem with a large pod, especially on tracks that get a little more turny than this, is that you can see that the polys of this track are not, like, the best. You often can't see what's happening. So, once your top speed gets to, like, 700 or 800 kilometers or miles an hour or whatever it is, it becomes really hard to see stuff because you're coming up on it so quickly. So Gasgano, being a very large pod, actually obstructs your view of stuff a little bit, and that's not great. So this is the simple boost mechanic. You can see the bar filling up in the corner. Once it reaches maximum, your engines will catch fire. This is a very easy race, so I'm actually going to set one on fire so you can see what happens. So obviously my speed is affected, and I can hold the R1 button to repair my engine, and you can see the fire going out there. Notably, my engine is shown in the lower left as like a HUD, and you can see that yellow damage there is sustained. You can't repair it back to green unless your repairs are very good. I don't believe. So, there's that. And as you can see, the maneuverability of the pod is a little weird, a little wonky, but this is such an easy race that you can do that. Now, when I was a kid, I always tried to jump off this like thing to the right here, this big sand dune, but I don't know why I thought it was faster. Maybe I thought jumping made you pod race faster. But as you can see, when you drive off the track and onto these like sandy areas, your speed dramatically falls off. You start seeing changes in numbers, especially when you get into that sandy part near that jump. It really slows you down. So we'll go forward out of here, and I'll kind of just run it out in the desert because we've got such a commanding lead, there's no way we can lose. Whoop. That's where the brakes come in. Here, and so if we go out here, I would use the boost to kind of compensate for the slowed speed, but you can see it's not maxing out, and now I can't boost, which I didn't really realize as a kid. I was just like, ooh, big hill, if I go off it, I get to jump. And you can see the speed goes back up there, but it's not a lot. It's really not worth it. But when you're a kid, you don't think about those things. You're just like, big pod, go off jump, racing, and that's the game. But there you go. Super easy. The first circuit is really not a challenge. In fact, most of the game is not. But here, 2,200 Truggets. We're off to a great start. We don't unlock anything, but over time, as you start racing against other people, you can actually take their stuff. So, one race out of the way, let's jump into the Mon Gaza Speedway. Super short one. We might be able to unlock our first pod here, Team Topa Galleys, but I want to do a quick rundown of this other stuff. So if you go into the inspect vehicle thing, this is where your pit droids would normally be, and you can not really do anything other than show the menu. It's just a neat little thing you can watch. So you have one by default, and he's working on something that was damaged. But that's really all there is to it. You just see what the pit droids are working on. Next, your vehicle upgrades. You can actually buy parts, and you can select one, and it'll take you right to the store here where you can buy pieces. There's not much selection here right now, but later on you'll get more. You can also look around the shop. You can see R2 hanging out there and stuff like that. And your pit droid management, you can actually buy additional pit droids, and again, there's 3 there, plus the one you start with. You max out at 4. The buy parts thing, that's the shop. You can get there straight from vehicle upgrades. The junkyard is the really important place.
Look around! I got a lot of junk.
So, in the junkyard, you can find parts for your pod at discounted prices. And the reason they're discounted is because they're broken. So, this right here, for example, is the control stabilizer, which is the best turning attachment in the game. But you can see that it costs a little bit lower price here of 4,765 Truggets. We don't have enough for it because its health up there in the left you can see is damaged. You're buying a busted part and you can get it for a little bit cheaper, and then your pit droids will fix it after one round and you'll have a functional part again. So that's all well and good. You can actually get a little sneaky with this and buy... God, Watto, please, shut up. Alright, hold up. You can actually get a little creative with the junkyard and buy parts that are cheap but very excellent parts, and then turn around and sell those parts after they're repaired to the store. And it's not quite an infinite thing. You can't just make a ton of money by doing it because you have to participate in races to make it worth it. But you can make money that way. It can actually net you a gain of funds. We're not going to worry about it, though, for right now. We're just going to plow through the game for our purposes. It's not really necessary. You can see Gasgano's acceleration is really terrible. It's taking him a long time to come up to speed. But this track is very short. I think my record on the track is something like 20 seconds with the right guy. Also worth noting, those blue X's to mark the characters, I don't believe that was in the original game. They were represented as yellow dots when this game was on the Nintendo 64, which were very small. They were the same color as the green dots there, so they were hard to see. And this track, again, is so small that you can lap people. I mean, we're looking at a time to win this race of like a minute. Ooh. So I'm making use of both the brake and the boost here because I want to get over the turns, but I'm trying to boost as much as possible because I want to get this over with. And there we go. 21:79, not a bad time considering it's very early and I have a sort of goofy pod, but there we go. And this track plays every time you win a pod, so this is Team Topagali's, his pod's being backed in, and now we can use it if we want to, but usually you end up just sticking with a particular pod the whole game. Individually, the pods do have stats that are interchangeable, or not interchangeable, but they're different. So like Elon Mack has terrible stats, Audi Mandrell has terrible stats. I think Dud Bolt is kind of weird because he has I think one of the best stats in the game. One of these 7 he's like better than anybody at, if I'm remembering correctly, but otherwise he's just terrible, so it doesn't make up for it. EB Endicott is very well balanced, fantastic, kind of goofy looking. Team Topagali's, same deal. This was my younger brother's favorite pod when we played as kids. And Anakin Skywalker, of course, is in the game, and he can carry you through the whole game. You could take Anakin or EB and have a great pod the whole time. I'm only doing Gasgano because I want a little bit more of a challenge. But really, that's it. That's a very quick intro to the game, how the stats work, how you buy stuff in the junkyard and stuff like that. So the information part is out of the way. And now, in every subsequent episode, we'll just plow through track after track after track, and we'll do it relatively quickly because a lot of them take just a couple minutes to do. And as we go, we'll pick up better parts, upgrade the pod, and we'll get the whole thing done probably relatively quickly. This is also a super easy game to platinum. I platinumed this game because it is only got a couple achievements and they're all very easy to get. So if you want a free, essentially an easy platinum, you can pick this thing up. If that doesn't matter to you, I still recommend getting the game. It's extremely fun, especially in the multiplayer, when you can play it kind of like a party game. I think, unfortunately, it's only 2-player, but it's still very fun. Until next time.